The the world of the Middle East is a confusing world. It's steeped in history. It's steeped in religion. It's steeped in what I think is just straight up tribalism. The idea of sort of religious doctrine underpinning everything. I think that just becomes weaker and weaker as you look at the way these warring tribes fight. It's a power struggle. It's a fight over land. It's a fight over territory. It's a fight over dominance. But the ruthlessness of the confrontations, they've just been upped through the years. And when Israel was attacked the way they were, with the ruthlessness, brutality, and barbarism that was the attack on babies and children and women, and with a wanton violence and mowing down the festival goers and taking hostages, which is the thing that's so complicated things now. The same rhetoric that followed our 9/11 followed that. We'll hunt you down, all of Hamas, every Hamas fighter is a dead man. You heard these things from Benjamin Netanyahu. The policies of Benjamin Netanyahu and the politics of Benjamin Netanyahu have not been politics of peace. They've been aggressive, and his government has been, as you're well aware, not something that gets widespread support in Israel. It created a massive schism in Israel where there were protests on the street. There were protests within the military. In Israel, there's mandatory military service, and there were those saying, I won't serve in the military because of the autocratic tendencies of Benjamin Netanyahu. So their leader is not someone in Israel who enjoys widespread support. In fact, there are many calls, and I gave you that information from Haaretz, the leading paper in Israel, calling for his resignation. Now, obviously, there was an intelligence failure here, and I think that might underpin a lot of the demands for his resignation. But beyond that, there is a frustration with where they are. And the unspeakable barbarism that I was talking about has left everyone wanting something, wanting some sort of retribution, somebody has to own what happened. But the hostages really confuse everything, because how do you get them out? We've talked before, and it's been reported on chapter and verse, Gaza is such a dense area, door-to-door fighting, it's going to be a mess. And now, Gazans are being asked by Israel, or told by Israel, really, to get out of the northern part of Gaza. We're talking about over 1 million people. And they're saying, get
24
out.
24 hours to do it, right?
Yeah, they're saying, get out in a day. Yeah. Today is your get out day. The reason I mentioned 9/11 and the rhetoric is because 9/11 produced a lot of bad decisions for the world and bad decisions for the United States, right? We started a completely, I'd argue, unprovoked war with Iraq. I'm not saying Iraq was an outstanding nation with outstanding leadership, and I'm not even suggesting that they weren't a warring nation in some way. And you could argue the U.S. is a warring nation. But you get my point. I'm not saying that they're choir boys. But that was a completely ridiculous and stupid war that George Bush started. And he started it because of the outrage over 9/11. So when you look at these events, you have to be cautious about what these events lead you toward. I share the outrage. I share the shock. I also have immense concern as to what the future brings because of the emotional reflexive moves on the part of Israeli leadership, and clearly the kind of preparation that Hamas has done and terrorists have done in the region that would suggest they're ready to take this on as a much wider conflict. In fact, I think Hamas is far more technologically savvy and equipped than they used to be. They have many more armaments, many more military strategists, and maybe a sounder, more ruthless strategy than ever before. When I say sounder, I'm talking about when it comes to taking on Israel. Albert, you have a setup piece on what's going to be happening or what's going on there now?
Starting with breaking news on Israel at war. Israel is urging the evacuation of more than 1 million people in northern Gaza, an indication that the military may be preparing for a ground invasion. Let's go back to our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, in Jerusalem. Good morning again, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, Gio. We're outside Damascus Gate. They've called for a day of rage, but things here are very quiet. Not the case in Gaza. A seventh day of bombing. And as you say, now this new warning from the Israeli Defense Forces for hundreds of thousands of people there to leave their homes immediately.
This morning, as the bombing of Gaza continues, Israel calling on hundreds of thousands of people to leave their homes amid fears of an imminent land operation. Israel's saying people should move from North Gaza for their own protection, but Hamas telling residents they should stay where they are. Overnight, the UN warning that moving so many people could have, quote, devastating humanitarian consequences. Its own teams in Gaza also affected by the advice as a convoy of UN vehicles drives south. Now, the military wing of Hamas claiming that 13 of the 150 hostages, which includes Americans, were killed in overnight bombing. Vast areas in Gaza already reduced to rubble, the death toll climbing remorselessly. More than 1,500 Palestinians killed since Saturday's attack in Israel, many more wounded. 300,000 Palestinians have been forced from their homes so far. This little girl seen crying in a stranger's arms. Humanitarian groups say hospitals are overwhelmed and on the brink of collapse. Now, Israeli forces are gathering at the border with Gaza for a possible ground assault. Israel retaliating for last Saturday's massacre of Israeli civilians that killed more than 1,300 people, including at least 27 Americans. And as the fighting intensifies, there are growing fears that the war could spread. Overnight, Iran, a sponsor of Hamas, says opening other fronts could be possible.
Well, the Israeli Defense Minister meeting with the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, saying this morning that Israel's moved from defensive to offensive, and also warning that there will be a long war. As terrible, as unimaginable as the events over the last 7 days have been, there are genuine fears on both sides that things are about to get even worse. Juju?
Yeah, that is, I think, indisputable. And
that's so hard when you see those little children with bloody faces. That just, I mean, you might as well just reach into my chest and tear out my heart.
And that's being played out over and over again. Sylvia says, as an atheist, blame it on two aggressive and entitled religions. One says we are the only chosen population by God. The other kills anyone who is not converted to their religion. Yeah. I would say this, Sylvia, I kind of agree with you. I don't think that any wars were waged by atheists, you know, that's, but I think all religions think their God is the right God. That's the whole deal, man. That's the whole, you know, the minute you say, oh yeah, your God's solid too, man. I just have a different God. That's just not the way religion's set up. There's one real true Savior. There's one real true God. There's one creator. There's one real one. All the rest of these people are misinformed. And the jihadism that accompanies it is the other element. And as I've told you, I think it's just tribal. I think it's just crap. I really do. I think it's the hook on which the tribal aggression that has been with human beings since we were here from the beginning. It's the hook on which that is hung. But regardless, and you know, I feel religion does a lot of good things, but organized religion in the Middle East is all about factionalized tribes. So here are two takes. One is what I told you, which is, this is the ramp up to war. This is the ramp up to military aggression. And I was making the point that I think Hamas is not what it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. They've been armed in different ways and supported in different ways through Iran. And you're going to see that. They knew Israel would come in. And so that's why I think we have to prepare for a wider conflict. As Kim was saying, I think you were saying before you went on the air, Kim, that, Israel said you got a day to get out. Hamas is saying, don't go anywhere. Stay where you are.
Right. And are they going to hurt you if you try to leave? Are you going to get shot in the street if you follow the orders from Israel to go? And I mean, I don't know of another country. I've never heard of this before. If America's going to bomb someone, we don't give warning. You do it. And here Israel's, I mean, say what you want about the whole conflict, but they've gave you at least notice to go. And then Lori was saying in the chat, it's kind of disingenuous because where do they go? And there's very limited ingress and egress, she was saying. So even if they say move south, well, okay, but where are 1.1 million people affected by this? Where are they going to go?
I think I was saying in the chat, because it came up last night, I can't, you'll remind me, and it's not really important where I said it, but, Egypt is the other player in all of this when it comes to areas bordering Gaza. So Egypt could open up their border crossing and let a lot of these people who are trapped in Gaza out and into Egypt. Why don't they do that? It's a non-starter, okay, through time. Since the Israelis pulled out of Gaza and gave it to the Palestinians, and since Hamas took over, Egypt has shut that border down. And the reason for that is simple. Egypt doesn't want to be responsible for all of these refugees. They just don't want them. What do they do with a bunch of Palestinian refugees? They're now in Egypt, and Egypt has to worry about where they are. Are they clothed, housed, fed? So you see the issues from Egypt's standpoint really clearly. But they're the other player in the Arab world that could do something. They border Gaza with Israel. So Kim's right. Where does everybody go? They go to these displacement camps that are set up by the UN, but you just can't get that many people out of there so quickly. I'm very concerned about Lebanon and essentially Hezbollah becoming involved and another front on this war. So nothing good happening. Randy said it's been reported by NPR this morning that Hamas is preventing people from leaving northern Gaza. And Hamas is a terrorist group. And I say that in the sense that Hamas wants to see civilians involved. They went after Israeli civilians, unarmed Israeli civilians. They mowed them down. They went door to door. They beheaded children, infants. They shot in cold blood everybody they saw. They rooted them out. It was straight up Holocaust stuff. And as a terrorist group, they don't value civilians except as a bargaining chip. And civilians being in that area, they embed their infrastructure in civilian areas historically. They always have, and they've done it in the Gaza Strip. So I think you see that played out by what's happening now. Of course, they don't want civilians leaving because civilians are their cover. And I don't believe that they value those civilian lives to the point that they want to protect them. So I know it's a pretty heavy few minutes, but this is a very heavy thing. And there's one last thing I want to say. Right now, America is outraged by what's happened. I'm talking about by the savagery and the brutality and the wanton violence of Hamas. And so they share the outrage, the righteous outrage of the Israelis. When a war starts, and it's going to start probably this weekend, I think America will be there. You've heard it. It's bipartisan. But I think as the war gets drawn out, I'm curious, how long will the American public be there? Look at what's happened on Ukraine. Everybody was, got to stop him, any way we can, got to stop Putin. And as the conflict has drawn on and Ukraine has been decimated by all of this, American support has waned. So I really wonder, I literally don't know, but my guess is that the stomach for war and supporting wars on the part of the American public is not going to be there in a few months. And as I told John Rothman the other day, and he said, you're absolutely right, which is, from Rothman, I feel, who knows the region pretty well, and I feel I can repeat it, with confidence. And that is the idea that you're going to go in, I don't care how many bombers you have, and I don't care how many troops you have, and you're going to root out Hamas, good luck. It's more than a long weekend, okay? And it's more than a month, and it's more than 2 months, and it even is more than 3 months. There are a lot of nooks and crannies and administrative aspects to Hamas. They're a terrorist organization. They can set up anywhere. I'd love to see them rooted out. I just don't know how it's going to go. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.